as ever, we're going to start in Gaza. Got a couple maps just so people get situated. I think you're familiar with these maps now, as we are 411 days into this ongoing crime that we can only hope that justice is served to the people that are committing these crimes. Even just sitting here backstage watching this excellent program that we've put together, just enraging what's going on. And like Ali said, even though we're eyeballs deep in this story every single day, it never would never get used to it. It just burn with rage over this. So we are going to focus on the resistance. So this is the map of Gaza. You can see the key corridors that Israel's holding on the south, the Philadelphia corridor, which blocks off the main crossing to the outside world for Palestinians, the Rafah crossing. Khan Yunis, which was the subject of a 6-month destruction campaign. Rafah, 6-month destruction campaign. The death of Yahya Sinwar and Tell Sultan. On the front lines, fighting with his commanders, briefing his commanders, showing that their commanders fight in the same trench in the south of Gaza. We look at the Netzarim corridor. We're probably going to have to widen the corridor. The Israelis have been hard at work committing their genocide and ethnic cleansing on the north side of the Netzarim corridor in Tel El-Hawa. We saw battles through there in previous months, and of course in Zaytun as well, to widen the corridor. They widened the corridor so much that Netanyahu, the IDF chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, the Shabak chief, their internal security, and the defense minister and top commanders went and gave a press conference on the beach in the Netzarim corridor yesterday. And there's a couple interesting points that I want to call your attention to. Netanyahu very rarely has interesting points, but these are two of them. So he fawned over his commanders who are committing this brutal genocide. But he also offered this. He said, I will also say that we want those who want to get out of this maze. Whoever brings us hostages and finds a way to do it, we will find you safe passage with your family to get out. And we will also reward you with $5 million per abductee. So he said, the choice is yours. $5 million for Palestinians to give up the captives. And that's an interesting thing, because the Israelis aren't fighting in the tunnels. They're not trying to get the captives back. They never have been. In fact, they hunt the captives. In the examples that the captives had an opportunity to free themselves, they were hunted and killed in Shujaiya. So just Netanyahu in the Netzarim corridor. And then we look at this map C here of northern Gaza with the zoom in, and we'll focus on what's happening right now, because we're now in the second month of the siege of Jabalia, the cutting off of Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia. Beit Lahia is not on that map, but it's opposite to Beit Hanun on the western coast. A lot of fighting in Beit Lahia, despite the fact that the Israelis said that there was nobody left there. There are people there. There are people in Jabalia. They're not leaving. They're not going south. They're not going through the corridor into southern Gaza. They're internally displaced inside the north, moving from place to place because the shelters are being targeted. Aid is delivered there, and then the Israeli military surrounds it, arrests the men, boys, anyone over 13 years old, rounds them up, as we saw, and puts them in those trucks that are shipped from the U.S., as our previous guest so well described. More than 2,000 people killed in the Jabalia operation, 6,000 wounded, but we know that those are incomplete numbers, given the fact that the hospitals have been under siege and are not functioning, civil defense not functioning, fire trucks, ambulances, all targeted, unable to function in the north. The brutal situation. More than 1,000 arrests taken to torture camps. Just brutal outcomes of that. And the IDF ridiculously said the other day that there's 100 operatives remain in northern Gaza. So this is going to be ridiculous. I'm going to point that out to you as we go forward over the next coming weeks about what 100 operatives looks like, because you're going to see 60 of them today on these videos as they destroy armored vehicles and require Maersk to ship new plates to them. So let's start off with number one. Starting off with a bang. This was a pretty remarkable operation. This fighter says that he's a wounded fighter. He's wounded in the Battle of Jabalia. He's holding a guerrilla action device with the magnetic strips on the bottom. You can see there. Guerrilla action device is a Yasin 105 warhead that's adapted to become a sticky bomb, essentially. And he says, despite my injury, I carry my warhead towards the enemy, towards their tanks. And he's quoting a sheikh. He says, put the knife to my neck, light my ribs on fire. You will not be able to besiege my thoughts or beliefs for a single hour or strip me of my beliefs or the light of my certainty. And here he goes, heads out in the middle of a battlefield, uh, runs right up to the tank. Look at the destruction, just criminal destruction all around him. Slides it into the exact spot they're trained to put it, right in the turret gap, right in the front of the turret gap. Pulls the fuse, has about 8 seconds after he pulls the fuse. You can see the fuse burning there before it blasts. So gives the fighters lots of time. These are well-designed weapons that 𝐐𝐫𝐶 has designed to give the fighters time to get out of the way. And you can see it's a devastating hit in the turret gap, the weakest spot on the armored vehicle. And look at, he goes exactly to that spot. He doesn't question it at all. He goes, puts it right into that spot. You're seeing his helmet cam on the right-hand side there, and the spotter on the left. He's going to throw up the victory sign here at the end just to cap off what was pretty legendary operation, one of the better operations that we've seen in this war. And that's saying something because we see incredible operations constantly. So, yeah, and we'll take a look. Let's watch it one more time because it's so good. So you can see the magnets underneath there. That's what stick on the armored vehicle. You can see there with his hand that he's holding it. You can see it has instructions on it for the fighters so that when they're waiting to execute the plan, they're being briefed by what's on the side of the weapon, treating them like professional weapons, despite the fact that they're manufactured in Gaza by the 𝐶𝐶 brigades for 𝐶𝐶 fighters. We're watching Gaza-made weapons. Nobody has made a weapon like this before. You are not going to find it elsewhere in the world. Essentially the fighter says he's wounded, he stays in the battle. And the point of it is, what he's saying is the genocide is not going to erase the struggle for national liberation. Nothing that they can do, nothing the Israelis can do to these fighters, to these civilians, is going to break their spirit for liberation. And Israel's trying. And look at the scene in that shot. Just watch it in all these videos that I'm going to show you in the next 45 minutes. Look at the destruction all around. 20 minutes of 𝐶𝐶 videos. We'll go to Lebanon after that. So after we watch him do this and throw up the victory sign, I want to show you a couple of still images that will help you understand the inside of the Merkava and what exactly they're trying to do when they put this guerrilla action device. Essentially, a heat-seeking missile that they attach with magnets. So you can see there that this is an Al Jazeera drawing. It's not exactly accurate, but it's basically right. The driver is in the front there on the bottom level. He's in front of the engine. The engine of this tank, of the Merkava, is in the front. Most tanks is in the back. They use it on the front for extra protection. And then you can see on this one, the shadow underneath the turret. That shadow is the turret gap. That's what we're calling the turret gap. And inside the turret are the commander, loader, and gunner, the three key, along with the driver, the three key crew members. And so that's facing one direction. If we look at the next picture, you can see exactly, this marks on it exactly where they insert that guerrilla action device, right beside the commander, right in his face, right beside the gunner, right in their face. These are devastating weapons that are being placed by hand exactly where they're supposed to be placed. This is from War Thunder. And in the back there, it has shells. They don't usually have the shells there. What they have there is room for other infantry soldiers and other crew from other tanks. So sometimes people ask, like, what happens when the tank gets disabled and they're in the middle of the battle? They run out the back door of the tank and they run into the neighboring tank, and there's room for an infantry squad or for crew in the back of that Merkava. So That's what they do, and that's why sometimes the tanks are left for periods of time. We saw that in Rafah, where that tank got hit 3 times by a guerrilla action device because it was not moving. So commander, gunner, loader are the 3 key people up in that top of that hatch. The guerrilla action device penetrates 600 millimeters, which is way more than the turret gap has of armor. It is the weakest point on the tank because, as you can imagine, with the way the tank is shaped, they're not expecting hand delivered munitions. And so they have an active protection system that tries to stop incoming rounds, but you're carrying the round with your hand and putting it in the exact place it needs to be put. So 𝐓𝐶𝐞 does that through all these operations. Maybe after the war, when there's time, I'll reorganize these videos and show you all the guerrilla action device operations. You'll see that they do that all the time in the exact spot. Excellent trained fighters executing a very brave task, wounded in battle. You can't stop them with that. So that's a remarkable operation, and that is in the Jabalia camp. This next one here, number 2, is also in the Jabalia camp. And here's another remarkable thing: they're sitting here with a 60-year-old elder. He says, in the company of this Hajj, who is 60 years of age, who refused to live in humiliation and disgrace, refused to flee, and asked for the resistance in the way of God. He says, we will wear out this enemy which flexes its strength on women and children and commits massacres day after day. And they say to the Hajj, you're a blessing. And the old man says, you're the blessing. And then they give him a kiss here, and then they go to battle. And watch how they go to battle. Out through the mouse hole, in the house, so you don't have to walk out in the street, through the mouse hole in the next house. The fighters are living in their own neighborhoods. They know how to move through these buildings that still stand. Israel's trying to drop all the buildings in Jabalia, but that's where you see there. You see the Yasin 105 pulls up his sights. We're going to see a Namr troop carrier enter the screen here, and he's going to fire from an elevated firing position, which is advantageous for the angle that it strikes the armored vehicle, requiring the plates to be replaced at best. That's the luckiest version of what happens when you're hit with a Yasin 105, which can penetrate 700 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. So seeing them move through the streets, I kept this one in here because this is actually, he's firing an RPG-7 here, anti-tank warhead, and you're going to watch, he's going to miss here. He just misses over the top, shot across the bow. The tanker would see that shell explode in front of him. But I just wanted to put that because we never see that. We see successful operations. Occasionally we see interceptions. But they don't just show us these videos because they went out and carried out the action. They show us successful operations. Here comes a third one. And this is being filmed by a closed circuit television camera, which is something that 𝐓𝐶𝐞 has all over the neighborhoods to watch these operations. So, and number 3, we're going to see the Israelis set up in a house here. They're setting up on the 3rd floor of the house. You can see him poking his face through here. We blurred that out, but you can find these on my Twitter at Jon Elmer. Maybe tomorrow I can put it up on the ticker at some point. We are following the community guidelines and blurring out, but you can see he's got an RPG-7 here. He's got an anti-tank warhead, and he's going to fire it right through the window that soldier was out looking out. And there's been a number of killed soldiers this week. The Israelis themselves admitted 8 killed this week, and as I've been saying throughout the war, the numbers never add up. So maybe they'll fill in some after the fact. And here we're hearing gunfire. The shaking is the gunfire because they're firing into the building after it. So you can see that they're spotting their position with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And then they're being able to move through the buildings, through the mouse holes, through the neighborhoods that they know, and get up close to get the perfect shot in this fierce battle where Israel has drones, multiple drones, layers of drones in the air, and all these armored vehicles that you're going to see throughout this operation. This was one of 5 operations against troop positions since you last saw me. This is one of them. And we can go after this to number 4, because this is a complex ambush. of a tank company here. This is ambushes of death, as they've been calling them. And you can see the fighters here setting up, digging, burying their 𝐄𝐤𝐻. We're seeing a 𝐄𝐤𝐻 𝐸FP, explosively formed penetrator, and that's the 𝐄𝐥𝐞, it's called. That is an anti-personnel weapon that's essentially made by unexploded ordnance. They fill up those buckets, and then they put shrapnel in those buckets. And then you can see this company of tanks moving through. There's a dozen or so. And they're going to pull up to this intersection to hold this intersection because they don't have infantry support, as we've been watching for 411 days. So they get blasted by the 𝐄𝐤𝐻 there. The 𝐸FP is the first shot, and then the second shot is going to be of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞, which is going to be buried as well, and it's going to come in from the side. We're seeing three different views of the first 𝐄𝐤𝐻 here. This is where we're going to see the 𝐓𝐡𝐞. It comes in from the side against the maintenance crew that's coming out to presumably do maintenance on the tank that got hit. And so they're hit in the ambush as well. So they're setting this ambush. The Israelis are driving right into the ambush, and they're hitting them. So right now they're 2 for 2 with these three weapons that they planted. And here comes the third. This is versus a Namr troop carrier, and this is another 𝐄𝐤𝐻. That might have been an Ashgarit troop carrier, actually. Yeah, it's an Ashgarit troop carrier, which is even going to be in worse shape than the Namr. And the Maskov Maersk activist did a great job of describing the vehicle. The Namr is a Merkava. It's the same hull. The Merkava has a turret on top of it, but otherwise it's the same vehicle. We can do number 5 tomorrow. This is against D9 bulldozers. The D9 bulldozers have been busy in Jabalia. It's part of the ethnic cleansing. They're trying to do it on the cheap, so they send in these bulldozers that are barely armed. They have slat armor trying to protect them. It's not good enough. And you can see there, that's a direct hit with a Yasin 105, which is far more than capable of destroying that. But look at the devastated terrain, as the Israelis call it. Like, look at what we're looking at here. The fighters are using the destruction of their society to blow up these D9 bulldozers, which are in short supply, especially when you're fighting on two fronts, although Israel doesn't seem too keen on fighting in the northern front. But these bulldozers have been devastated. We saw more than a dozen of these blown up in this show alone. And last show, we saw even more. So these bulldozers are not faring well. Some of them might be remotely operated. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 makes a system that can turn these into remotely operated bulldozers, because really their job is to just push over the buildings. They push over the buildings that have been bombed, bombed from the air, bombed by anti-tank mines, and then they strike them. It just, like I said, just look at all of these videos and look at the destruction, and just hope that justice comes to the people that are committing this. It's unbelievable. So number 6, oh yeah, excellent. This is what a D9 looks like. So you can see inside with the commander and the driver, they operate in 2-man teams, and you can see the amount of protection that they have. It's not much. A standard RPG anti-tank round would destroy that slat armor. And so a Yasin 105 with a tandem charge does really significant damage. And as you can see in the cab, there's not a lot of room. So there's not a lot of missing who's in the crew when you're hitting these. So I thought I brought those visuals just so people could see what it looks like inside these behemoths that we just see from the outside. So thanks for doing that, Tamara. So 6 is, this is an interesting one. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 identifies, again, we're watching CCTV footage here. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 identifies this as a troop carrier. That's what it says on the screen there. But watch when it gets hit with a Yasin. Yeah, so that's an explosion that we don't usually see. So I'm going to say that that's going to be an unmanned, remotely operated M113 Zelda, which the IDF has been using to act as truck bombs. A tank bomb. They fill it with munitions and they drive it and blow it up in an intersection to take down houses. This is all their budget genocide that they're carrying out now. It's cheaper to do. They also have all these M113s that are aluminum and they're not battle ready. They can't go to Gaza in these vehicles. So they have thousands of them from the Americans, from their big brother, handed them down to them along with their allowance. And they converted them. They converted them into car bombs. They used them as car bombs. So 𝐓𝐡𝐞 intercepted that car bomb and blew it up pretty good. We've seen that before. We've seen these 113s before. I've been talking about them for many months. We first saw them being deployed in 𝐶an Yunis back in, I don't know, I don't know time, but back earlier in the war, when the battle was raging in 𝐶an Yunis, we first saw them. So number 7, this is interesting because I want you to look at the tip of the warhead that he's got here. He's got a Tandem 85. We'll show you it in better after, but this archer with his Tandem 85, his buddy's saying, "It's not you who threw, it's God who threw." Which is what they always say to the archers. And then we're going to see a Merkava tank moving through the total destruction. Not one of those buildings is habitable. But that's what the bulldozers are doing. They'll come up to that building you see dead straight ahead, and they'll just push it over. That's what the bulldozers do. In some cases, the bulldozers have to clear the way. There's the tank entering the screen there, dead center. And you're going to see from an elevated firing position, again, no trophy intercept on that. Trophy tries to intercept the active protection system on the tank, tries to intercept between 10 and 30 meters. So there's no way it's getting that one. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 believes that it does. And then the spotter says, "We got it, pull out." So you can hear the way that the two communicate with each other. Now we look at 7B. So I did a still frame here. This to show you. What we're looking at there is the 85 millimeter RPG-7 shell that are essentially not good enough for the up armored, for the number of plates that the Merkava and the 𝐓𝐻 put on. They add extra plates on top of plates to make thickness that the RPG-7 doesn't penetrate. So what we're looking at here is the extension on the end. They put the 64 millimeter on the end there. But they turn it into a tandem, the Tandem 85. But what we're looking at here is really interesting because I've shown you this a couple times before, but this is obviously proving the case that they are manufacturing these right now in Jabalia. Jabalia has been the subject of 3 major invasions. The north and the south are cut off from each other by the Netzarim corridor. The manufacturing is happening on a localized level. It's Jabalia that's rebuilding their weaponry, and that is a clear indication of it to see an unpainted warhead on the end of their 85 millimeter RPG. So interesting development. We've been watching that throughout the war to see how the manufacturing was continued, and that is proof for sure right there. It is a good shot of the archer just before going into battle. So we could go to number 8 now. This is a soldier who's got his head popped out of the probably the commander's hatch, and he gets fired on here in Jabalia camp. And this is interesting at the end. We're going to watch here. So you see he's got the FN Mag 7.62 mounted machine gun. And in a November 12th field report, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said, 𝐓𝐡𝐶 fighters were able to target a Zionist Merkava tank with a Yasin 105 shell, then boarded it and seized a machine gun from it near the Al-Farqura school west of Jabalia camp. So they captured that gun off of the top of the tank, which is really interesting. And actually, it was one of the first experiences that I had in Palestine when tanks were in the streets of Jenin, and I was working, and a particularly precocious kid hopped up on the tank and was trying to reef off the mounted machine gun. And when he jumped down back off the tank, I was kind of like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm trying to get the gun off." Like, dummy, what do you think I'm doing? And that was my welcome to Palestine moment. But yeah, captured weapon, always a trophy weapon that the Palestinians will have for many years to come. People will see it. So number 9, this is a night operation. We don't see a ton of night operations, but there's a D9 armored bulldozer again. They're in the forefront of the battle in Jabalia. So they're going to fire on this. You're going to see the Yasin fire. So you see the two flashes. You could see the first flash there, and the second flash is exploding on the D9 bulldozer built by Caterpillar in the United States. If you want to have a complementary campaign to the Maersk campaign, it's Caterpillar's being shipped as well. So yeah, and now we want to move to Beit Lahia because this was all from Jabalia camp. Jabalia camp's been fighting fierce. This is Beit Lahia. Again, another tank hit from an elevated firing position. The Israelis have told us that Beit Lahia was empty of fighters, but it doesn't seem that's the case. Again, so now that you saw that picture of what the D9 looks like, now you can imagine how close everything is when you get hit from, I don't know, what is that, 40 meters at the most by a tandem charge warhead. So that's the second operation of 3 in Beit Lahia. There's one more coming here against a tank commander riding outside of his tank, and he's going to get an elevated Yasin strike. So the resistance is all over. This is not the same cell running around harassing the Israelis. These are the Qassam army still intact, fighting in the north amid this scorched earth genocide. And the battle continues. And I'm going to continue to bring you these videos to show you from the Palestinians' eyes. Like literally, these are coming from their cameras, their helmet cameras, and they're showing these to be seen by the world, to show what is going on, to show that they're not surrendering, and the civilians as well. The civilians aren't surrendering and going to South Gaza. They're not. They're just displaced because the shelter was burned down literally by the Israelis. You can see the Israeli TikToks taking credit for burning the schools down. But they just moved to another place. They're not giving in. And I think I described it on the show last week, but after the shelter was burnt down, there was a massive demo, and the men marched down the street chanting death before dishonor. Like, no, it's not, you're not going to defeat them by massacring people's families and destroying with scorched earth. That's not going to win this war. So number 12 is and just great, like just the artistic videography of that is just the layout. Qassam is getting even better as the war goes on. This is an elevated Yasin strike on a Namr troop carrier that will need new plates. That's how they fix them, multiple plates. And we don't know a lot about that because Israel keeps that part a secret. They don't let that information out, and that is part of their keeping their morale up. Same reason they lie about casualties and lie about how many people were wounded. They lie about how many plates they needed to get sent. So the Mask Off Maersk campaign is something I'm very interested in, to see how they reverse engineer the statistics from shipping and try to put those statistics together to understand how many of these armored vehicles have been destroyed, because we're watching them, 411 days. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, right on October 7th, we saw the tanks being destroyed. There was a dozen on October 7th. Yeah, so 13, is that 13? Are we at 13? 13 is another D9. Again, look at the landscape, just brutal. But the fighters are using it to their advantage and blowing up another set of soldiers, or it's remotely operated, because some of these are remotely operated. But there's also casualties. And like I said, 8 casualties just in this week alone admitted by the Israelis. And this is an operation in the Netzarim corridor, number 15 here. This is a joint operation with the Ansar brigades and Qassam. So they're finding an Israeli position in the Netzarim corridor, not where Netanyahu was, but in one of these buildings, again, where they believe by bulldozing 7 kilometers, they give themselves space. We have to edit that video, but again, you can check my Twitter. Maybe we can throw it up on the Chiron there if people want to check them out, because that was a hit. And calculating the distance and the speed of the bullet, that's a 1.2 kilometer hit. So significant distance on that operation. And just before we wrap up on Gaza, so 8 𝐓𝐡𝐞 operations versus tanks, EFPs versus tanks, 16 Yasins versus tanks, 3 versus APCs, 12 Yasins versus D9 bulldozers, 4 IEDs and anti personnel IEDs versus troops, 4 close quarters battles in which 4 soldiers were killed in close quarters battles, including one battle where fighters came up from a tunnel and hit the Israelis, 9 sniper operations, and then the rockets and mortars are constant. They're going on all the time. I don't bring you those videos because we don't have time to show all of them. But they're constantly harassing the Israelis in the Netzarim corridor. And now in Jabalia, they're firing mortars in Jabalia as well. And as we know, the Israelis have 35 injured a day. More than 1,000 a month go into the rehab department. So on top of the killed in action, is the number that go into rehab, 35 per day on average. So that those numbers are likely up because the battle in Jabalia is fierce, it's ongoing, shows no signs of ending, and there's way more than 100 to 200 fighters, like the IDF said. That is a ridiculous claim in a war of ridiculous claims. So that is the Gaza front.